call the meeting to order. Deb, do you want to take roll call, please?
Slade,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Cody,
Yep.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes. Do we have any additions or to the agenda?
No.
All right.
I had a question about growing dreams, so if you wanna add that on there.
Great. We'll add that into business there. All right, then we need a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Motion by Slade, second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Conflict of interest disclosures? None.
None.
Okay. And then public input, I see we got Chris. So the floor is yours.
Okay. You just want me to stay right here? It's up to you. You probably feel like moving around and jumping around a little bit. All forward jumping around right now. But I guess anyway, thank you for taking time to let myself and Jeff and Dustin come to talk to you today about the possibility of adding a wrestling facility to the school. The reason that we are here is because we just want to have the same type of equity as other sports in this school have. And we've had wrestling in Freeman now since the early '60s, and we've never had a place to call our own. And I believe from the get-go, they practice on top of the stage in the community center right now. That's where they practice. I can speak personally from 1980 on. We worked out in the elementary lunchroom, and I can tell you working out there, the mats had to be rolled out every night, put back away each night. And generally, we had to wipe off all the food that the kids would throw behind the mats each night, tater tots, hamburgers, and all that other stuff, and it just wasn't feasible. I mean, we made it work, but it was still a place we didn't have our own. Kids, I mean, from the high school had to drive over there every day for practice, and so on. So, we're in that current situation now with us being in the community center. We have to have kids drive over there for all our practices. We have to roll the mats up every night, we have to put them away. There are nights where we can't practice at all because if there's an event going on. Now this year it's been a little bit different just because of COVID. There haven't been any no wedding dances on the weekends where they start setting up on Fridays and we couldn't have practice. And things like that, but last year I know there were Fridays, the day before a meet, before a tournament, we couldn't practice because we didn't have access to the facility. And it just comes down to, again, back to that equity, we have nothing to call our own. And so some of the problems that we deal with start off with just our limited availability to even wrestle. We have our 2-hour window and that's it. And it's just not feasible that we can't practice any other time during that time. We have no locker room. So I promote hygiene extremely high in wrestling. The probability of getting MRSA, ringworm, impetigo is extremely high. And if we have kids that have to leave, putting clothes on, go somewhere else, to go home and shower, go somewhere else, again, that's a safety issue. We don't have access to any type of locker room facilities over there. No training room. I have to make sure that I have enough blood supplies over there. I need to make sure I have enough tape, blood cleanup, nose plugs, everything like that goes along that can pop up during a wrestling practice or any type of event. The stuff that we do have over there, we can't lock it up. We just got a brand new Sterilite machine. It sits up on the stage. I mean, it's a $2,000 piece of equipment that keeps the mat sterile. It can't be locked up. Other stuff that we have, I have a $500 scale sitting over there. It's in a room, and so we don't have anywhere to put our stuff. Next, we have no access to the weight room. There's many times I want to get up in the weight room. We can't wrestle hard every day. Your body needs a break. And we have no access to the weight room unless we bring everybody over here. There's also days where kids can't practice because they got whatever injury the case is. I can't put them on a treadmill, I can't put them on a bike to get a workout in. They're stuck there. They can run a little bit, but sometimes you can't have that jarring on your knees, whatever the case is. Elliptical or a bike is the best way for them for rehab. I'd have to send them over there on their own, be unsupervised if that was the case. Matthew, we put away each night, that takes about 30 minutes of our practice, setting up and taking down every night. We can't go in and just start practicing. We just can't start. We have to, the mats that we have all have to be lubricated. They're a Ziploc mat. They all have to be lubricated, lined up perfectly with a roller, and then all locked into place. The safety of it, you know, every restroom you walk into, the walls are padded, mats go right up to the floors. Here, we bounce our heads off the wall, or not off the walls, but off the floor. There's no safety equipment around there. And we had that problem. I did have, you know, for 2 or 3 years, I did have a wrestling room that we quickly outgrew. It was just kind of a Band-Aid. When I did have that classroom down, which is Mr. Luthro's office now. But the first year, I had 3 concussions because we didn't have mats on the wall. We had kids going into the wall on a takedown. You can't stop yourself. I had 3 concussions that year because of that. Same type of deal here. If we don't have the proper equipment around, we're still dealing with safety issues, elbows bouncing off a wood floor, heads, knees, whatever the case is. Again, kids have to drive to practice. Now, I know it's only across town, but we're looking at junior high kids, 6th graders that wrestle. They have to catch a ride with a high school kid, or else have to have a parent drive them over to practice each day. Coach Wallman actually had to go out and buy some of his own stuff so that we could use over there, just to set up stations for with dumbbells and other types of equipment, just so we can do things, because we don't have, I mean, I can't take stuff out of the weight room up here and keep hauling that stuff back and forth. I don't think administration would like that very much, hauling that stuff back and forth. We have no off-season time that we can train. Once the mats, I mean, at the end of the season, I don't have anywhere for these kids to train. Otherwise, we have to go to Legend of Gold, or we have to go to Metro, places like that for them to get into a camp. I want to start being able to, I could host open mat nights. I can bring a technician in, a clinician in, and host camps here at Freeman, but right now it's not possible with the setup that we have. We do have more numbers coming up. We have 4 seniors this year. I'm gonna have replaced those with, I believe, 4 6th graders. Then I got another 7 5th graders. It'll be 6th graders coming up next year. And Dustin can probably even speak more of their numbers with the youth program now that he deals more with the youth program, and Coach Wallman helps out with the youth program also. We have a lot of numbers coming up, and also girls have been sanctioned as a high school sport now. I do not have any girls out right now, but I anticipate that will be coming, that I'm gonna be having girls out for wrestling, especially with the 5 towns. I did have some interest this year. They didn't want to pull the trigger because it was so new, but right now there's 175 girls sanctioned in the state of South Dakota in the first year, so it's growing huge. And I think it's gonna come. So I think, I mean, as you see, there's been a lot of negatives here with what I'm dealing with as a wrestling coach and what we're dealing with as wrestling coaches. And we just are simply asking that we have the same entity as, I mean, if roles were switched, where I put down the wrestling mats on the basketball floor, then the basketball team had to go into the community center and practice, I don't think that'd be feasible. I mean, if the roles were reversed. And I'm just asking that we have that same opportunity here. We have 5 towns that are coming together in this program, and I mean, we talked about this is a beautiful facility. We host the region wrestling tournament next week here in Freeman, and we've had it here for we've had it here 2 other times since I've been back in Freeman. And when people come here, coaches say, "Where's your wrestling room at?" 'Cause I mean, wrestling coaches, we're a little different. We all want to see each other's wrestling rooms, what we got. And when I say, well, it's across town and the mats are it's on the basketball floor that we have to roll out. They can't believe that we don't have a wrestling facility here, knowing the history of what we've had here in Freeman with the wrestlers that we've had come through this building. And so that's where I'm gonna leave it. I mean, if Coach Wallman or Dustin have anything else to add to it, I guess, you know, the only positive thing that I could say is that we have wrestling. I mean, that's the positive. We're wrestling. But there's a lot of things holding us back right now, and I think it's time that we take a serious look at this and look at possibly adding on the wrestling room. I mean, it'd been great if when we built the elementary school, back then, it would have been, you know, a drop in the bucket to add something on at that time. I moved back the year we built the building. If I'd have came back a year earlier, I definitely would have put the bug in here, but, I mean, the school was half built when I moved back to Freeman.
How big of a room are you, like, what is
What's the standard size for?
adequate, or,
You know, I'm not looking for an SDSU facility. They can put down 4 full-size mats, but a full-size mat is 42 by 42. And that's what we practice on right now. My vision would be at least 66 by 42 wrestling area. And that also comes down to the safety part of it. And that's why we had to move out of that room. I couldn't have more than 2 or 3 groups wrestle at a time because we're falling all over each other. I mean, as soon as the kid get on a shot, start doing a takedown, they're falling over each other, going into the walls. I mean, there was a window, we had almost a kid go through the window in that room. And so, I mean, the wrestling size room, you know, I would love an 42 by 84, get 2 full mats down, but, I mean, I would love it. But 66 by 42 wrestling area, and then having a 10 to 15 foot spot on the side where you don't have to walk on the mat when you walk in. You have a place to take off your tennis shoes, you have your cubbies, benches to take your shoes off instead of stepping right into a room right on the wrestling mat. Which
That's not including dressing room or weight room.
we don't need that stuff, because if we're hooked up to the school, we have locker rooms. I mean, all we're looking at is the room. We have the locker room facilities, and we can go up to the weight room. We got a couple coaches, then we can split up, take a group up to the weight room, the other guys stay in the wrestling room. We have the first aid room, we have all that equipment here, instead of hauling it back and forth.
How many student athletes do we have participating between junior high and high school in wrestling?
Currently, right now, we have 12. We're gonna lose 4, we're gonna get 4, but I'm gonna also be gaining another 7 next year. These are wrestlers.
Same as a full basketball team.
Yeah.
as far as, like, okay, I've never ever wrestled, so, but like, as far as room, like, if we were in a room such as this, I mean, obviously, flat floor, but that's all it would need to be, I mean, that's all it would need to be is just a room that obviously has heat and air and,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm, like, what else, I mean, padding on the wall and,
How about, Mr., for reference, so you said, what'd you say, 66 by 30?
42.
66 by 42, so for reference, if you take like a basketball court, like what area of the basketball court would that take
A
up?
basketball court, you can get 2 full-size mats.
Like
on a
all the way
basketball,
across?
yeah.
a basketball court is 90 foot. And like,
So if you're talking like you said, what, 84 by,
42.
that would be probably about the length and the width of a basketball court, like
Pretty
a high
close,
school
yeah.
sized basketball
Yep.
court. So, what, from one end line to like the opposite free throw line would probably be 60 some,
Yep,
give or take?
Yep, you're pretty close.
And maybe not quite as wide then, as that.
And the reason the 42 seems like a goofy number, but that's the largest mat, you know, so it fits perfectly in the room, or it fits perfectly.
have you looked around to where you would like, I'm just thinking about it, like right outside, so you had access to the gym, is that big enough area there?
I'm looking like right along the bus route, that coming off the elementary gym, that grassy spot along the sidewalk,
Is there enough space there?
there'd be enough space there. And, you know, and like I said, you know, and Slade brought it up, we're not looking for locker rooms, and, I mean, that's why we want it here, so we have access to that stuff. I mean, it's just simply walk in the door, go to the locker room, go to the weight room, go to the training room, and so on. I mean, to put in there, all we would need is the building. We would need, of course, mats on the wall, a water, you know, probably a water fountain in there, and then we would need water in there, so we'd have water to wash mats. And electricity and HVAC. I mean, that's what we would need, and I'm not a engineer or contractor by any means, but I would think that it'd be pretty easy to access that stuff, to get into that area there coming off the elementary gym.
What are the 5 schools that participate in our wrestling program? I know 3 of them, but I'm not. aware.
Freeman Academy, Menno, Canastota, us in Marion.
Okay.
And, you know, right now, someone told me, I don't know if it's true or not, but, you know, even the Marion Freeman Co-op, just when we were on our own, that's the longest lasting co-op, I think, right now in the state of South Dakota. With 2 separate schools that have worked together, not being co-opted as a school or consolidated as a school. I mean, it's worked.
Guess as far as I go, like, that's a fair ask, and I think it's worth having Kevin look into.
I already told Mr. Seiler, but I think I did anyway, at the end of the month, I have a architect coming in to look at a couple other things. And I just had kind of mentioned that we had had this conversation about that, so probably something I'd run by him just to see whether or not that, you know, that space out there and all that stuff would be feasible. And then, you know, a lot of times they have better ideas. I mean, they've done that stuff before, so can kind of give you a ballpark idea of what you'd be talking about from a cost perspective.
So Chris, do you guys ever move around to other schools and practice there? Or is it Freeman is the base?
Freeman's the base. I mean,
Okay.
we're the most centrally located, and, I mean, that's another good reason, just, we are centrally located between everybody that's in our co-op. And so, you know, Menno doesn't have mats, we're actually the only town that has wrestling mats. Marion ended up selling theirs, they had the old heavy style mats that weighed about 1,000 pounds per section, those old school mats. They sold them to another school district that was starting up a program, so we're the only school that has wrestling mats. And I think, being that we are centrally located, I've never heard any problems of, you know, the schools coming here. You know, if we're going from Menno to Canastota for practice, that's a pretty good jaunt. And so I think it's just wise to.
I think one probably difficulty would be like, for example, with us in Canastota, we each have our own fields, we have our own maintenance crew, we kind of divide, you know, the costs up between the two. You know, it looks like we would probably flip the bill for all 5 schools the way it's, have you talked about how that appears, or?
I haven't talked to any schools, I mean, I would think that with our football field, I don't know if Canastota has anything to do with they might have to do something, you know, they split up the cost for the coaching staff, and I know running the program, that is split up between all the schools. So whatever it costs a year to run the wrestling program, it is split up equally amongst how many kids they have from each school. So if we have 5, they have, whoever's got whatever, it's all fractioned out that way. But as far as the building, I would assume it'd be Freeman footing the bill and improving our campus.
Do we currently have student athletes from all 5 schools
Yep.
participating?
Just out of curiosity, not that it affects, Menno is, like, are we gonna lose them, if they go up with Scotland? Or do you not know that, or not that it matters, I mean, it doesn't matter, just out of curiosity.
I feel it's not gonna happen, because Menno was co-op with Scotland at one time in wrestling, and that didn't go very well.
Okay.
And now that Scotland's with Bonham, and I know, as far as I guess I can't say 100% for sure, but I believe every practice with Scotland, Menno, Avon, or no, let me back up. Scotland, Bonham, Avon, all the practices are in Tyndall, as far as I know. I think the only practices that are held in Scotland are just the little kid practices.
I was just interested.
You know, talking about Scotland, the interesting thing is they built that new weight room / wellness room, and you see it as you go by on the sidewalk. Have you guys wrestled on the mezzanine? Is there enough room there that could be your home and we build a wellness room, or wouldn't that be enough room?
The only problem we have with that is we had the mezzanine for 1 year, but whenever there was a doubleheader, we couldn't practice, because games
Oh,
started
okay,
at 5
gotcha.
o'clock. So, we could roll the mats out for about 45 minutes, and then we had to put them away because basketball games were starting at 5 o'clock. So, yeah, we tried that too.
Okay.
I've tried everything to make this work the best, and, I'm gonna be honest, we're running out of options to make this work, so. You know, and I have no idea what it would cost to build that, you know, something like that. I mean, are we looking $3,000–4,000? I'm not sure what, I mean, we definitely don't have to build it as high as we don't have to build it as high as the gym is. I mean, come off the buildings, you know, however many feet, 15 feet, I'm not sure. It's probably a 30-foot wall. I won't even know what, I mean, if you come half off of that, I mean,
What's your guess, Doug?
For
Price?
cost? addition like that's gonna run you between $180 and $200 a square foot, so roughly 400,000.
Do we have any other needs that need to be met as far as needed space that can be two birds, one stone?
Kind of, you know, the issue is if you know, if you're thinking about building over there, any classroom needs you would have probably doesn't make any sense to add on to that side of the building. You know what I mean? So like at the high school end of the building, for example, we've talked a lot about, well, even at board meetings, about like a fax program or different things like that. The difficulty with that whole scenario was, and I don't even remember, was it 2012, somewhere around there, before I got here, when they, whoever it was retired, and then they kind of transitioned that room into a wrestling room. But when they did that, they basically capped everything off and put that wall up between there and what's now one of our science rooms. So the prospect of ever kind of adding that back, that program back, would now require some type of an addition onto the building. So if you're gonna do something like that, you know, that end of the building down there and going out would probably make the most sense. I don't know, you know, if you're gonna do a wrestling room type of thing, that you'd really wanna go that direction with it. I mean, you could, I mean, it'd still be better than the option we have right now, but you'd be away from, you know, locker rooms and different things like that, so you'd probably have to change your whole perspective on what you want that to look like. But we are getting to the point at the high school where having an extra classroom or two, or something like that, would probably be beneficial. It's just a matter of, you know, how much money do we want to spend right now on some of that stuff. You know, we do have an option with where we sit right now, and Debbie and I talked about this a while back. You know, taking out some capital outlay certificates or things like that are an option. I mean, where we're sitting right now, so we wouldn't necessarily have to pay for it all at once. You know, we could just, you know, extend it out. I think if you're just talking, like Doug said, a $400,000 investment, I think where we're sitting right now, you'd probably have enough to just do that without having to stretch it out. If you were thinking bigger or something along with it, then you might want to start thinking about, you know, how do we maybe just kind of take up a little more long-term debt.
I think the most cost-effective way would be to just tackle it all at the same time, as opposed to
Sure.
having different projects at different times.
Out of curiosity, if the weight room were to move, not that there would be any place to go, I don't know, but did the mezzanine work? Like, was the mezzanine sufficient area if you put up walls so that like you had your own room? Or no? Again,
mean
just
it-
asking. Is it too small? That's fine if it is.
You know, it's not that it's too small, you know, it's long enough, and I can tell you that I've hosted Disney wrestling camps here, for 3 or 4 years now, and that's what we've used before the weight room was built. We've used the mezzanine, I'd have 50 kids up there working out. Now, I don't think we're gonna have 50 kids ever in our program. I can see having 50 kids in our youth program, but in a high school program, you're talking, not even the A schools have 50 kids. You know, it worked, but it just comes down to, I mean, you'd almost have to block that off. And the thing that I worry, well, we got the elevator, I guess, because that fixes the problem with the Disabilities Act of getting up there. But, it's just, you know, the noise of basketball, doubleheader nights, you know, when we are practicing up there and things are going on in the gym. I mean, it is a distraction.
Right, I was just asking, like, if that was, I mean, not that I don't know where you'd ever go with the weight room without probably building anything either.
Mhm.
So you, I mean, like, in that case, why would you just build a wrestling thing? But just asking if that was,
I mean, we could make it work, but, I mean, it's still gonna be a distraction with all the events going on.
okay. Well, then, I suppose if you want me to try and get some numbers whenever that comes,
I'll see if I
we'll
can get some more information.
table it, we'll have a discussion at that point then.
And we can
That
kind of
sounds
sit
good.
down a little bit more and talk specifics about exactly what you would need.
Yeah, I would like multiple options too, as far as that being included with additional classroom space that's needed.
Or I don't know if things need to be added on, storage even onto that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can never have enough storage or places to store and stuff either, so, I mean, it could be built bigger. I mean, I haven't taken my 25-foot tape measure out there yet and measured how big that area actually is, or how big of a room that you can get in that area, but I would assume there'd still be, I mean, if you wanted to go bigger and add some sort of storage or whatever the case is, I mean, I'm guessing there's plenty of room for that yet too.
Okay.
Nice, Chris.
Yep, thank you for
Thank you.
listening. Thank you.
All right, then we, let's see. Need a motion to approve the minutes of the regularly scheduled school board meeting of January 11th, 2021, minutes of the special school board meeting of February 3rd, 2021, minutes of the Corn Belt Cooperative Board of Advisors meeting to January 20th, 2021, financial reports and claims for January. Does anybody have any questions?
It should be February, claims for February.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve that? Motion by Cody, second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, administrative reports. Shane?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
First item I had is we were anticipating a spike in COVID after Christmas break. We never really did see that spike, but we did start seeing a small spike towards the end of January. The board adopted the new CDC guidelines that allowed kids to come back after 7 days with a negative test. And I did have my first kid trying to get back into school early that tested positive, that was asymptomatic. So that was the first I've seen with the tests that we have. We didn't originally know if those would catch asymptomatic kids, but it did. So this kid was trying to come back after 7 days, like the policy, and they actually tested positive. So it was a good thing that we adopted that. So that kid got sent back, unfortunately then got sent back out for 10 days. We have parent-teacher conferences on Wednesday and Thursday with the new format that Kevin set up the first semester, and they run from 2 to 6. It's on Zoom. I know my teachers loved this format. They thought it worked well, and they actually thought the Zoom format worked well. I know there were some parents that were even driving down the road that were doing their parent-teacher conferences, so I think it was actually convenient for the parents also. Second semester, I've seen an influx of new kids. We've got 6 new kids at the elementary. It's kind of an odd time to get that many kids. We got a new kindergartner, a new first grader. We got 2 second graders, a 4th grader, and a 5th grader. Kind of unique. I think Kevin saw an influx on his end too, new kids. Traditionally, we had the elementary book fair at our second parent-teacher conferences, and we just because of how the building's locked down, we canceled our book fair, and I know that's our main fundraiser for the elementary library, so we will try to get by for a year. Smarter Balance tests that we didn't take last year because of COVID are scheduled to start March 8th. So our window for Smarter Balance is March 8th through May 7th. And that includes kids in grades 3 through 8 and 11. And then the state science test, we normally had a different window, but they're going to run that window the same time, March 8th through the 7th. The science kids are 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. The month of February is a busy time for our 2 EL teachers in town and at the county. That's when we do our access testing, and that's the e-waste acquisition test. Basically, if they test out, we don't get the money for it. We've had a lot of kids testing out at the county, so unfortunately the job they've done at the county has actually hurt us financially. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Questions for Shane? Thanks, Shane. Kevin?
Okay, to piggyback off what Shane said as far as enrollment, I just did, updated our current enrollments today, actually, and I believe our fall count was, so last Friday in September was 337 and some odd decimal.
145.
And as of today, we're at about 352, right around there, some decimals, so I think we've gained, around 15 kids since we counted last year, so kind of odd. Typically we do gain, our enrollment fluctuates a little bit throughout the year, but it's kind of odd to see that many people come in the middle of the year. So First thing I have, and we kind of updated the agenda a little bit, for those that are actually watching, if they go on the website to where the agendas are listed, there's some links to some different information on there, so people have access to some of the stuff that everybody else has a chance to look at before the meetings. But anyway, some of the COVID money, so we had kind of had a couple major things with the last round, so we had $168,000 that came kind of that the governor diverted to schools back towards the end of the calendar year. And kind of the two main things, we put some speaker systems in some classrooms for some different things there. And then the board did a one-time payment to teachers of all staff members for $1,000. So we're sitting at having about roughly $45,000 left of that money. And as part of the package that the president put through, President Trump put through before he went out of office, we're gonna have about another $314,000 in federal money that are coming our way. And I think I kind of touched on this at the last meeting a little bit. One of the things that I really wanted us to kind of look at was taking that math administrator position we had and expanding that. And being able to use, as we kind of looked into it, being able to use some of the federal money that we're gonna get to kind of pay for the other halves of those positions for at least a couple of years moving forward. The main thing that they're looking for in using that particular money is some of the discrepancies or gaps that have been created in your instruction because of time in and out of school for different reasons. So I think you can get a little bit creative about how you use it, but that's one of the things that I really wanted to try to see if the board would be willing to do moving forward, because I think the math thing kind of speaks for itself with some of the gaps we saw in instruction, but also some of the things that we're trying to do as far as split kids a little bit earlier to get them on some more accelerated pathways. And one of the things that happens when you start splitting kids early on is you obviously create different sections of things, and the need for a little more teacher to go around to be able to make that work. And then, you know, I did do a survey last month with the teachers in terms of the need for a 6 through 12 principal, a full-time 6 through 12 principal. And most of the results of that came back as saying that they would really like that particular position. I think this year we've kind of been forced into a scenario with everything that's going on where I just don't know that teachers probably have access to the support that they could really use with a lot of the things they've been dealing with. And in addition to those things, based on our luck with buses this year, I think we're probably going to have to get at least one new bus. And that would be one of the allowable expenses we could use some of that money for also. I sent you guys an email, I think it was last week. We got a memo from the Secretary of Ed basically just saying that that general fund cap limit that we talk about kind of frequently as far as not being able to have an excess of money in your general fund, they're essentially gonna waive that for the next 2 years because of all the federal money that schools are getting, and because that's gonna run through your general fund. So we still have to be a little bit careful about how much money is in there, but at least for the next 2 years, as of right now, we're not gonna be penalized for having more than that 30% in there because of the extra money we have. So it's a little less stress on Debbie to not have to worry about that. But again, we'll just have to keep an eye on that stuff moving forward a little bit there. Some other things that we can spend that money on would include, you know, cleaning supplies and different things like that. We did use kind of a chunk of some of that, obviously, for those audio enhancements in the classroom, so tech things or something else that you can use as far as that particular money is concerned. So that's kind of what I have as far as a COVID update there, mostly just from a funding perspective. Legislative update, I've sent you guys a couple emails that I get from the school administrators group about some different things that they're watching. A lot of it right now doesn't necessarily apply to us a ton. Still haven't had a lot of talk out there about whether they're gonna follow through with the governor's recommendation of the 2.4% increase, but as of right now, it looks like everything's headed in that particular direction. I have a tentative calendar for next year. Take those and pass them around. Good chief. So, pretty similar to what we have this year. The only thing that I don't know yet, because they haven't released football schedules for next year yet, I believe we host the first and the third home games. So September could vary a little bit there depending on where that homecoming football date gets thrown in the mix. We'll probably try to avoid having homecoming be the first home game, because usually that's the first Friday that we're in school if we end up hosting the first one, so it's not, doesn't work real well to try to squeeze homecoming in on a half week there. But just kind of give you something to think about here a little bit. We'll probably try to approve this in March, once I kind of get a final idea what those football schedules are gonna look like. As far as consolidation stuff, reorganization stuff is concerned, still working with Tom Oster on that. I think we're kind of eyeballing early March, late February, early March, as a timeline as far as when we can have our next, could have another public meeting to talk about some of that stuff. I believe we're trying to kind of organize a little bit more information. Like I said, last time it was kind of one-sided in terms of where we stand on a lot of different things and some kind of general information. I think the goal that time is to, the next time around, is to get a little more information from Marion, so we can kind of start looking at, you know, what this could actually look like if we were to take it further. And then the big question that most people have is, what are things gonna look like from a financial perspective? So that's kind of what we're looking at. When I have more of an idea, he's kind of busy with doing a lot of the superintendent searches that are going on across the state right now. He works through Associated School Boards to do some of that stuff, so he's been a little tied up lately, so we've been staying in touch there, but that's kind of why we're looking at March as a timeline there. So, I don't know for sure, Kyle, have you talked to anybody since the meeting on, the city council meeting on Wednesday?
No, I've talked to Doug and I.
So, we were approached by the mayor and member of the city council about the land to the east of the high school parking lot over there. And I believe, I don't know exactly whose idea it was, if it was a city idea or a baseball association idea, or who kind of came up with that, but I think for a while they've been working on trying to get some type of baseball, softball complex going. And they had presented the idea to us about trying to use that land to the east of the parking lot there to do that. I did send, it's on the agenda there, some different things in terms of what we have to follow, and I can hand out, pass out to you guys. There's a couple different plans here as far as what they were thinking. I think there's two of them here that show a 2-field setup, and two of them that show a 3-field setup. These are the 2s, these are the 3s. They're in black and white, but they're somewhat easy to see. So, and Kyle, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong on some of this stuff here. I think what they're originally thinking is trying to use that land, and then we're asking the school to help contribute some money to that particular project. I wasn't really 100% sure how some of that stuff worked, so I talked to the Department of Legislative Audit, and then also our school attorney, just to try to get some ideas. I guess A, whether we could actually contribute to it, and then B, whether we should contribute to it or not. So he kind of listed off to me, they both listed off to me, there's a number of statutes that kind of apply to this type of thing. So as far as the land itself is concerned, that's really not the issue in all this. The school can basically just either give the land to them or come up with some type of lease agreement for the use of the land. The bigger question lies in the school actually contributing money to that type of project. So there's two statutes, 655 and 131525, which probably make it okay for you to contribute money to that. But the big question that comes up with that is, can you justify it being a K-12 education expense in order to do that? The other part of it kind of lies in who's the one that's actually doing the project. If it's City Baseball Association, some nonprofit or something like that, and you want to contribute money to that, like I said, you could probably find some wiggle room to do it, but that would have to be general fund money. If it's the school district, the Souths, that's the one that's organizing the project and doing all that and kind of paying for it up front, then you could use capital outlay money to do that. So that's kind of what you're looking at there. And I don't know exactly what the, like I said, what they decided on Wednesday, as far as, who's gonna be the one that's kind of spearheading that project, or where that went. I don't know,
You probably know the most.
That's the $1 million question, is who's gonna be behind it, who's gonna maintain it. Those answers have not been identified yet, even close. Only thing the city did is that we'll give you $150,000 seed money.
they just don't know who they're giving that to right now?
Correct.
So, I guess I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that. I think overall, I think the idea of the project is a really good idea. I think it would be good for the community. I just don't know what our role or place in that particular project is, if that makes sense to everybody.
I don't know what our role is either, but I do think we need to take a role in it. Summer baseball is probably by far our most popular athletic program in town. How many kids do you think we have in baseball?
Baseball and softball.
And softball. I mean, we have girls softball teams with 20-some girls in each grade. I mean,
I think there were 140 youth last year.
altogether. So it's insanely popular with all age groups, both, girls and boys. This is a no-lose for me. It's a win-win. And regardless of how we get it done, it needs to get done. So whoever we need to talk to and however we need to figure out what we can spend and the best way to utilize those funds that's the direction I think we should go, so. Yeah, let's keep the ball rolling on that, is my vote.
Is the Activities Association still talking about sanctioning softball as a school sport?
I haven't heard anything about that lately.
There's talk about it. That's been going on forever, and I think, with the popularity of girls softball in the state right now, I think it's not too far away. Now they've added, I can't believe they added girls wrestling as fast as they did, and not girls softball. But I think girls softball is gonna be coming very quickly here also.
And I'm just pointing it with Izzy, that keeps being the talk, is that they're talking about doing it, where if that's the case, they would have.
We'd be a step ahead.
Exactly.
Yep.
Just as long as those fields are built big enough that they could have I don't know the dimensions, but make sure it's not a T-ball field, because the T-ball field doesn't help us at all. for
I think
softball.
it was, do you remember, was it 12 under baseball? Would that be the same size as the official softball?
Softball's like 220.
I think they went off of what they have at Sherman Park, what their size fields are, which they hold the state tournament
Yep.
every year, so.
You can always put up the snow fences and stuff like that.
Yeah, they get the, I don't know if it says any dimensions,
It doesn't look like
down
it.
there.
It doesn't say
Not
any
these,
dimensions.
Yeah, there's a.
I think the way Mike had talked, that was just two very rough ideas of what could potentially go there.
I think it needs to be pursued too. Just need to talk to the right people and get things lined up. See what everybody has to contribute.
I agree, and prior to tonight, I agreed a whole lot more. I will say, I also see the need of a wrestling program building, and so if we have money for something that's not technically part of our school, I think then we probably better have money for a wrestling
Well,
program.
and I'll tell you,
That is part of
when
our
I,
school.
when I talked to legislative audit and I talked to the attorney, they both kind of said the same thing, like, if you guys think that it is a benefit to the community, you know, their suggestion was give them the land and then go from there, but try to stay away from, just be careful about contributing money to something that isn't necessarily attached to the school. You know, not only for your own protection, but just, you gotta be careful that you don't set a precedent there that, you know, anytime we get into a situation where something could benefit the community, somebody's gonna run and expect the school to kinda chip into that side of it. So it's a slippery slope when it comes to that side of things.
Chris, can I ask you another question? As a PE teacher, would you see yourself utilizing it for different things when weather's decent?
Yeah, I do, because actually, I mean, we didn't do it this year just because of trying to keep kids separated, not sharing equipment, but I mean, I do, with the younger grades at least, we do batting and throw, you know, showing how to throw a ball, you know, the correct way, and so we hit off the tee and do stuff like that, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it'll be a little bit of a jaunt from the gym over to the field, you know. I got
Just get the
25
kids warmed up while they're getting over there.
That's their warm up.
You gotta loosen up, yeah.
We gotta be in the two-step to get over there and to get back, but, you know, so we have 25-minute
Sure,
periods for the
yeah.
most part, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's something that, yeah, I could definitely do, and, I mean, usually I did that in the spring, or the fall time, and, so kids would just come out in baseball and softball, so they always enjoyed doing it, when I would go through those different hitting drills, and, you know, we don't have gloves, but just wiffle balls, and just learn how to throw the ball correctly and stuff like that.
Is there some kind of joint committee we could get with the city council and Freeman baseball? I mean, even if we get the money from the city that they're saying, and we contribute what we can contribute, I think there's still gonna be a deficit. There's probably still gonna be some fundraising involved, so there's gonna probably have to be 3 different groups involved in this, the city, the school, and some sort of fundraising committee. We should maybe get that put together as soon as we can, so we can kind of figure out the logistics as far as all 3 parties and what they're gonna contribute.
Are you in?
Absolutely not.
Well, I'm guessing Kyle and I are already in, because I think we probably have to be.
I could be on it, I pretty well tied to all 3 already. So.
Right. I think you'd be the best pick.
So do you have to get up and move to a different chair when you're speaking on behalf of?
Probably, yes. I just get over that chair and roll around.
Okay. Anything else on that you guys have? Some of the other stuff I listed on there, some capital projects or capital improvement stuff, kind of been looking into for this summer. The bus lane and the elementary parking lot are kind of getting pretty rough. There's some sidewalks over on the south side of the elementary through the elementary playground that need to get done at some point in time. We were kind of holding off on some of that stuff just because it's been so wet the last few years that would have been kind of a mess to do that. But all that, especially that bus lane stuff over there, all the dirt work they did on that prior to putting it in was subpar at best, so I think that's why we're seeing some of the issues that we have with that stuff down there. So, the other thing I have listed there, we've had a lot of issues with our speaker system out at the track complex. Particularly if you've been to a home football game, if you stand on our side, in an effort to try to make sure they can hear on the other side, you almost have to wear earplugs on our side to make that work. Anyway, we had actually Canastota is in the process of putting a new gym up, and I was kind of talking to Larry up there about what they were doing for audio, and the guy that they were working with, I got a hold of him and he came down and put together a quote for us, included on some of that stuff there, but for about $8,500, he can basically replace the speakers that are already up there, and then his plan was to put 2 more up on the actual top of the crow's nest there. They'd be all-weather speakers You could leave them out there all year round. It would help with football games, track meets, all that fun stuff there. So, I was pretty impressed with the price he came back with on that, so I think that would be money well spent on that side of things there, so.
Just a question on the bus lane, parking lot,
Yep.
sidewalks, that all goes out for bid, correct?
Depends.
$100,000 is the limit now.
Right. So, see, that was part of the issue that they ran into the last time around when they did, particularly the bus lane, or based on what I've been told, is they had to put bids out for it, and they just had some issues with the low bid, and that's kind of where they ran into some problems there. But, yeah, he's right, they changed that, I don't even know how many years ago it was they changed that, 2 years ago? It used to be 50, and now it's 100. So, that's kind of what we're looking at there. And I did have staff evaluations. I don't really have a whole lot I need to talk about on there. I know that topic came up at the last meeting. The non-renewal / termination part I put on there is a link that you can find, I already sent to you guys, but a link you can find on the website on the agenda to it's about an 11-page document that comes from a man by the name of Rodney Freeman, who is a school attorney in the state. He's not actually our school attorney, but he puts on kind of like a workshop every spring as we get close to negotiations, and, you know, April 15th, the day where you have to kind of do some notifications on some different things. And that particular document kind of runs through and answers a lot of questions about how that process works, because it's all basically laid out in statute as far as the non-renewal and the termination process. So I just thought it was a good resource for people to kind of get an idea of how that stuff is actually supposed to work, so that's why I put it on there. The other thing, I'm gonna go back here, I brought up the very first thing with those 2 positions. I was looking for some input on. What are your thoughts on taking those 2 and expanding them into full-time positions? I did toss around the idea with staff of another position too, but I wanna wait and see kind of a math reading intervention type position, but I wanna wait and see if we actually end up getting any more federal money coming our way based on what's going on out in DC right now.
Well, if we were shrinking, it'd be a different answer for me, but if we keep adding students, obviously we're gonna need more staff to accommodate those students. So I guess I would be okay with going to full-time for both of those positions.
I agree with Slade.
Let me give you some numbers here a second too. So, as far as taking the administrative portion and making it into a full-time position, you're probably looking at an extra $30,000 to $35,000 a year, which for the 2 years we could pull from that federal money. The math position, you're probably looking at 20, and then plus if that particular person would take any health benefits or require any health benefits or anything like that, could be anywhere from an extra 10 to 20 on top of that. So, and the reason I don't include the health benefits with the administrative side is because that's stuff that we already had budgeted in this year. So the only thing that we'd be able to take out of the federal money would be stuff that we would be adding in addition to what we've already done at this point in time. So that's why you'd be able to take about half of each of those and pay for it with federal money, at least for a couple of years. But also keep in mind the trick with all the federal money is after the 2 years is up, then you have to determine how you're gonna be able to sustain paying for the other half of that, because that federal money.
That would give us 2 years though to do a cost-benefit analysis and see if that's really paying off, so.
Right. And the other reason I'm asking right now is because if we're gonna do something like that, particularly with the administrative side of it, you'll start to see a lot of those jobs start to open up here in the next couple of weeks. So the quicker we could get something out about that, the better we would be in terms of applications and things like that.
I think I got 2 yeses.
I'm not opposed to trying, I mean, if we try it for 2 years or whatever, and who knows, even with, if we're talking consolidation, and that's in that same time frame, so like, it's not like it's not an option to adjust at some point, so wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it if we have room for it.
I don't agree with that.
All right.
I'd be open to the math, probably. I think I can wait on the extra administration. But it doesn't matter at this point.
All right, I do not have anything else for the good of the cause.
All right, any other questions for Kevin? All right, thanks, Kevin. Our business items, we're gonna hold a discussion regarding the cooperative in the sports of cross-country, basketball, track, and volleyball.
So I sent you some notes from that meeting we had on the 27th and kind of ran down most of the stuff that we had talked about, which is not anything that was really uncharacteristic or anything. And we kind of decided that most of the stuff that we talked about as far as specifics related to practices, transportation, uniforms, expenses, coaches, games, all that stuff was probably the easy stuff to figure out along the way, or we could figure it out along the way. We listed some potential positives and some potential negatives that could be associated with sports co-ops. And I'm just gonna kind of read through those quick, and then at the end, we kind of basically said, these are the things we'd like to see each school do at their next board meeting, so we can get an idea of where we're gonna go from here. So, some of the positives that we talked about at the meeting as far as co-oping was concerned was greater participation collectively, so basically having more kids to work with. Student athletes would be receiving more playing time, and they would be able to play at the appropriate level, which I think is one of the things that we've discussed here a little bit. And then you get that because you have more kids, hopefully, as far as the participation aspect, you're gonna have greater internal competition, which I know is something that we as coaches talk about a lot. And I think, like Mr. Seiler, you would kind of get where I'm coming from there at practice. You know, and even Austin, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's just really tough when you don't have the kids. It's easy for them to kind of develop that attitude that, well, it doesn't really matter what I do because there's nobody else here, so I'm gonna have to play one way or the other. So that can be a little difficult to deal with sometimes. So just having that in itself is helpful. Some of the things we talked about that could be potential negatives, the logistics of transportation, the increased expenses that schools could see because of the increased transportation, schools losing home games, longer days for both students and coaches due to the extra travel time on the front and the back side of practices, the transition to Class A, and the potential for, you know, loss of enrollment due to schools coming together and, you know, kids deciding they're gonna go somewhere else because they don't want to do that. So we closed the meeting by talking about what the next steps in the process would be, and basically we kind of narrowed it down to 2 things. The board just kind of needs to decide what is their level of interest in continuing to pursue future sports cooperatives. And then if there is interest in continuing to pursue those, what is the end goal or timeline for finalizing that agreement? And the reason we kind of add that part in there is if you're interested in doing this as soon as next year, everything, or next fall, everything would have to be finalized and submitted. So finalized, approved by all the boards involved and sent to the state by the executive board meeting for the Activity Association, which takes place in April. So kind of as far as timeline, you know, are we thinking next year? Are we thinking 2 years down the road? Or are you thinking considering further into the future? Some of those different things there. So I'll go back to number one. You know, what is the level of interest in continuing to pursue co-ops in those particular sports?
I think we should pursue it myself.
Yeah, I agree, I think it's worth for sure pursuing. I will say in the interest of, if that's what we decide to do and that's what everybody else's board decides to do, I think we should. This is getting ahead of myself, but instead of going small group meetings, just go everybody, and that way we can actually decide something and not waste nights if we're gonna pursue it forward.
So you think like everybody in terms of like all boards, all members?
Yeah, I do. I think that way, if something gets decided, then it's able to be decided, but that's my opinion.
So to address both your questions, I'm 100% in favor of a 3-school sports co-op, and I think we should do it as soon as possible and not wait. Especially with the consolidation being an option, I think having kind of a courtship period to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that ahead of time before there would be a vote would be beneficial for the community. So I think we should do it, and I think we should do it ASAP.
I think, there's a lot of people out there with different opinions, and there's a lot of people asking, where do we get our input? And so, I think that there's a lot of division between Class B and Class A ideas. When we talked about, back 4 years ago, either going with Canastota or going with, Meadow and Marion, that Class A, Class B, was a big topic. And I think they had addressed it 6 years ago, before I got on the board, they had looked at doing an all-sports co-op with Marion. And I think they voted it down ultimately with, I think that was a big thing. So I don't know how big that still is there, but I think that's a concern. I think there's concerns for driving kids, even like young kids. Are we gonna combine all the way down to grade 3, 2? You know, I think there's parents saying, well, then we'll be driving all over the place. So, coaching staffs, you know, so forth. There's a lot of questions, I think, and I don't feel great with 5 people making that decision. I think we probably need some more public input. So that would be my advice, is to at least have a public meeting, get some public input, so we feel like we're not the only ones here, you know, without any input from the public saying, you know, getting a clear direction. So that would be my next move.
So we continue to pursue it.
So I will say that Mrs. Sage and I sat down with some of the coaches this week just to try to get an idea of where they were coming from on this. Obviously, a little bit of concern there on the extension of the day for them, for both them and the kids, as far as, you know, travel time up front, travel time on the back end. Not that we're not already doing that with the football co-op right now, but, you know, just a concern there. One of the things that did come up was the whole concept of Class A versus Class B. I think the comparison that was made there is looking at, particularly girls' basketball was the topic that came up there, as far as the success they had and even making a state tournament a couple of years ago. You know, you take that group of kids and you look at how they fared against a competition that year, and probably wouldn't have went as far as they did in that particular year. Now, obviously, you gotta take into account that you'd be getting more kids from other schools at the same time, but, and I'm not trying to move you one way or the other, I'm just presenting the information that was presented to me on that. So, I know there are some concerns on that end. One other thing that I just wanted to bring up, and you can do with it what you want. Part of the reason why I went through and I looked at enrollment numbers for us again today was one of the things that I brought up, or well, had talked about before, but I just wanted to confirm is, right now, I think a lot of people are interested in the co-op thing just because of where we're at, particularly with kind of some of our boys' sports, but even the numbers involved in some of that. And I just wanted to point out that right now, if you take out the senior class, which wouldn't factor into next year's stuff, our 3 smallest classes in the whole school, K through 12, again, throw 12 out, are 9th, 10th, and 11th grade right now. So as you get further down into the elementary, 5th grade, 27, 6th grade, 23, 7th grade, 23, 8th grade, 24. So, you know, your numbers are gonna bounce back again a little bit here in the next couple of years. So not that that's a reasoning for or against doing something like that, but I just wanted to make sure that that was information that you had, so you kind of understand how that works. Now, there's no guarantee that those numbers are gonna stay there, but obviously, like Mr. Voss and I kind of talked about tonight, we've already kind of seen an increase in kids, particularly at the elementary level, over the course of the last couple of months. So, again, just something to consider.
I think we kind of take that with a grain of salt though too. I don't think as many students participate in sports as in decades past. So we can't look at a class size and say, well, in the 80s and 90s, this many students would have been in athletics. So now we're gonna have that many students in athletics. I don't think the trend's going that way. So the increased class size might kind of adjust for the smaller class size, but also might not. So yeah, I don't know if that's a real safe thing that we can fall back on.
Sure, no, like I said, I was just making sure that you kind of understand the trends that we're seeing there on that end, so. So consensus,
Onward.
I think it sounds like to continue on, and if, I guess all of a sudden there's a big influx of people that are not in favor of it, I don't know how everybody else has been, but I've not heard, at least on the co-op part, I've not heard really one person, I don't think, say that they weren't in favor of it. But that doesn't mean my phone might not ring off the hook tomorrow now because I said that. But
And I've had a number of.
I'm not wishing for that.
I've had a number of people approach me about it, and nobody said anything negative about it, so.
all right, well, I'll see, we can get I think we had maybe talked about a tentative meeting last time, but maybe I'll just reconnect with them and see if we can maybe just put something, if you're thinking, just collectively get everybody in the same room.
To be honest, I think, especially if the idea is to do it by April, what I think 15th was the day, and that doesn't give us a whole lot of time. So unless we wanna have a meeting and then another meeting and then another meeting, you know, like I think it'd just be in the interest of saving time, that would probably be the best.
All right. We can do that.
Any other questions? All right, then, Mark, Growing Dreams.
Yeah, just had a quick question on Growing Dreams. Somebody had told me that, they were written up by the state, and, so then I searched and found that they were, and it seemed like it had to do with our situation, that there's a drainage field that goes across their playground. And, anyway, so I wanted to see if Shane or Kevin had, you know, any insight on that. Looks like that had been written up back in August. And so I wanted to see if there was, what was going on there and what the deal was.
Yeah, we actually got a bid to fix that, all that stuff, but they did not have the opportunity to get it in before the ground froze, so.
Sounds good.
So Kerner's gonna get to it as soon as he can get to it, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, then we need a motion to go into executive session for SBCL 1-25-2, parentheses, 1.
So moved.
Motion by Slade, second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Lead executive session at 8:09. Thank you for coming.
Named it after him.
We start talking to them about donations for wrestling.
Yeah, as much about the other one now, the last time after we were there, so.
Good, Debbie, used to be.
Oh, I didn't choose that, sorry.
Kevin Axon, just.
So, okay, it seems like there's a committee on
Lost
this, so.
chapter.
Sounds good.
If anything
Okay.
is different.
Yeah.
I should have kept my paper clip. There it is.
Sure.
Yeah, Kevin's got everything.
I believe you. Is there a flavor, a certain flavor of
So we have our fireworks go.
anything I need to find to?
Somebody lose a bet?